Hi, this is Steve with Thresher Media Group. Welcome to When You're Ready to Listen. This podcast is dedicated to exploring the truth about God, things you may not have understood, may not have been taught, or quite frankly, had a very hard time believing. And since our entire relationship with God rests on believing, it is important we learn how to separate the truth from the many lies and fictions that abound within the religion of Christianity. So when you're ready to listen, tune in and discover a pathway to freedom, encouragement, life, and hope. Episode 26, Revelation 1, verses 17 through 20. Jesus addresses John. Revelation 1, 17 through 18. When I saw him, I fell at his feet like a dead man. And he placed his right hand on me, saying, "Do not be afraid. I am the first and the last and the living one. And I was dead, and behold, I am alive forevermore, and I have the keys of death and of Hades." This reaction by John is fascinating, given that John spent 3.5 years with Jesus and knew him personally. John would even refer to himself as the disciple whom Jesus loved. Clearly, they had a very intimate relationship, and they were so close that Jesus even revealed a glimpse of the brightness of his glory to John on the Mount of Transfiguration. But not even that prepared John to see the glorified Son of Man. His emotions were overrun as he tried to connect his previous experience with Jesus, the man, to this image of Jesus, the glorified Son of Man. He simply could not do it, so he fell at his feet as though dead. Fear not. We get a lot of insight from the code in this next statement, but he laid his right hand on me, saying, "Fear not." First, saying is rendered in the present active participle, so the Son of Man is even today saying this, and will continue to be saying, "Fear not." Perhaps it might be considered a normal convention for John to use the present tense to describe what he heard Jesus saying, but we dare not skip over the underlying message the Spirit is communicating to our souls. Even now, he does not want his bondservants to live in fear. Second, fear not is rendered in the present passive imperative. It is a command. However, being rendered in the passive voice, this is not a command we can take care of on our own. It is not something we can do. In effect, Jesus is commanding us to even now let him remove or calm our fear. As with all things that extend from his grace, it is his job to do the work. We just need to let him. We simply have no power over the fear that dwells in our soul, but he does. We need to let him calm and still our soul. And that is his command to us. He simply desires our willingness to let him be our I am, Yahweh Shalom, the one who brings us his peace. Third, since he specifically used his right hand when he touched John, the right arm, the right hand are symbols of power and authority, he was communicating to John that he has the authority of the Father as the one who sits at the right hand of God, and therefore he has the inherent strength or power to remove or calm John's fear. But being a command, an imperative, John, like each of us, must choose to let him. After all, this is a relationship that requires reciprocation. We are willing, and he acts. If we let him, God will pacify all the reasons we tend to become afraid of him, of others, of ourselves, and of his plans for our lives. The first and the last. Jesus states that he is the first and the last, a declaration very similar in context to his claim to be the Alpha and the Omega, but still it's different. The Alpha and Omega speaks of the fact that all things originate and come to their completion by him and through him, whereas the first and the last is more of a statement on his prophetic declarations. For instance, the first and last is used 3 times in Isaiah, a perfect declaration. Each time it is regarding a prophetic disclosure of coming events, which he predetermined. It's as if he is saying, I have the first word in determining what will be, and I have the last word in bringing about what will be. When I speak, it is assured to come to be. It is just a matter of time. This is intended to bring great comfort and security and instill in us a deep trust in his words. The fact is that every promise he has ever made and every prediction he has ever communicated, all will come true in exacting detail. It is just a matter of time. Isaiah 41, 1 through 4. Coastlands, listen to me in silence, and let the peoples gain new strength. Let them come forward, then let them speak. Let us come together for judgment. Who has aroused one from the east, whom he calls in righteousness to his feet? He delivers up nations before him and subdues kings. He makes them like dust with his sword, as the wind-driven chaff with his bow. He pursues them, passing on in safety, by a way he had not been traversing with his feet. Who has performed and accomplished it, calling forth the generations from the beginning? I, Yahweh, am the first, and with the last, I am he. Isaiah 44, 6 through 8. Thus says Yahweh, the King of Israel, and his Redeemer, Yahweh Sabaoth, the Lord of hosts. I am the first, and I am the last, and there is no God beside me. Who is like me? Let him proclaim and declare it. Yes, let him recount to me in order from the time that I established the ancient nation. And let them declare to me the things that are coming and the events that are going to take place. Do not tremble and do not be afraid. Have I not long since announced it to you and declared it? And you are my witnesses. Is there any God besides me? Or is there any other rock? I know of none. Isaiah 48, 3 through 12. I declared the former things long ago, and they went forth from my mouth, and I proclaimed them. Suddenly I acted, and they came to pass. Because I know that you are obstinate, and your neck is an iron sinew, and your forehead bronze. Therefore I declared them to you long ago. Before they took place, I proclaimed them to you, so you would not say, my idol has done them, and my graven image and my molten image have commanded them. You have heard. Look at all this. And will you not declare it? I proclaim to you new things from this time, even hidden things which you have not known. They are created now and not long ago. And before today you have not heard them, so that you will not say, behold, I knew them. You have not heard, you have not known. Even from long ago your ear has not been open, because I knew that you would deal very treacherously, and you have been called a rebel from birth. For the sake of my name, I delay my wrath, and my praise I restrain it for you, in order not to cut you off. Behold, I have refined you, but not as silver. I have tested you in the furnace of affliction. For my own sake I will act. For how can my name be profaned? And my glory I will not give to another. Listen to me, O Jacob, even Israel, whom I called. I am he. I am the first. I am also the last. Sorry for the long quotes, but those passages are simply awesome and humbling. He is the first. He has declared what will be. He is the last. Therefore, his word will ensure that it all comes to fruition exactly as he declared it. It's all just a matter of time. Accordingly, there's no negotiation and there is no manipulation that could alter what he is going to communicate to the churches and declare over them. It is a done deal, and he will cause it all to be. The living one. And the living one, and I was dead, and behold, I am alive forevermore, and I have the keys of death and of Hades. This is an encouragement that functions as a foreshadowing of coming events, as there is so much death in this book, including a large sacrifice of true believers who, although they are slaughtered, will live again, just like him. He is the living one. Therefore, he wants us to understand that our life is in him, and our death is in him. Thus, even if our future is not what we had hoped, he is the one who is now and continually in control of life, death, and Hades. Accordingly, we can fear not. We can let this truth of his rule over life, death, and Hades remove the fear that would otherwise grip our souls. Because regardless of what happens in this life, the bondservants will live again, and they will be called the living ones. The choice to die. Jesus said that he was dead, and that is rendered in the middle voice, meaning that he is the one who chose to die. No one killed him. He gave up his life, he laid it down on his own initiative, and in the same manner, he took it up again, such that he is now the living one. This has massive overtones for our lives as well, as he is looking for those who will follow him, those who will follow the Lamb even to the altar of sacrifice, those who will willingly lay down their own lives so that they might live. Hence, he proclaims that whoever does not carry his own cross and come after him on a daily basis cannot be his disciple. Why? Because he won't let them, as they are not worthy of him. Said another way, the path to being a living one is through our willingness to let Yahweh crucify our flesh, to put down and remove all that stands in the way of his life fully possessing our being and fulfilling the design point in us, where we can honestly declare, I have been crucified with Christ, and it is no longer I who live, but Christ lives in me. If we are willing, like Jesus, to die to our flesh, we will come to know both life and peace. We will be a living one. It's an exchange. We allow him to judge our flesh now so that we will no longer choose to come under judgment or condemnation, but will have passed out of death into life. And since he has the keys to both death and Hades, he will ensure that those who now choose life will join him in eternity when they physically perish. Their future will not be found in the grave, nor in the deep gloom of Hades. When they die, they will be in the presence of Yahweh. Fear not. Write, Revelation 1:19. Therefore, write the things which you have seen, and the things which now are, and the things which are now about to choose to be after these things. Fiction alert, fiction alert. There has been a whole lot of to-do made about this verse by those who push a pre-tribulation rapture theory. Predominantly, this verse has been taught as an outline of the book of Revelation, with chapter 1 being what John saw, chapters 2 through 3 being the things which, from John's perspective, are the sequential historical church age up through the present age of the church of Laodicea, and chapters 4 through 22 being what is to take place after the church age, after the rapture. Imaginary lines are drawn and inserted into this passage so that they can declare that the rapture must take place after chapter 3, after the so-called church age and before the tribulation events beginning in chapter 4. This fabricated outline is presumptuous. Fundamentally, it ignores and supersedes the code by exchanging it for some version of instinctual religious wisdom and sensuality that creates an end times mythology based on emotion and not on the truth revealed by the Spirit of God. We will find that there is much in the letters to the 7 churches that defy a sequential historical viewpoint. Likewise, there's much in chapters 4 through 22 that defy a post-rapture presupposition. Therefore, it is critical for us to examine how the Spirit uses the code to painstakingly make a distinction between present realities and the future, with some events being layered like a cake, such that they are happening now and then. With that said, we must not say that something which is rendered in the present tense is a future event, nor that something rendered in the future tense is a present event, for then we completely ignore the plumb line of the code. Moreover, if the 7 churches were a depiction of what we would now claim as history, then the first 6 letters are not even relevant to our lives. They could be summarily ignored and dismissed altogether. They were meant for someone else, not for us. Following the fictional narrative, we could conclude that only the 7th letter would apply to our current condition, the letter to Laodicea. Thus, all the promises made to believers in the first 6 letters would have to be understood as applying only to those who lived in those sequential time epochs, respectively. They would not be our promises, but only theirs. Clearly, that is a ridiculous conclusion to make in far too many ways to discuss currently. And all just to support an end times fiction about the pre-tribulation rapture? I would suggest that we leave this verse with the understanding that John was exposed to things from the perspective of eternity, and he saw things which have always been, things that are, and things which revealed the future regarding the end times and the second coming of Christ. Things that are, from his perspective, we're about to now choose to be. Things which shall be. It is fascinating that the phrase, things which shall be, if viewed through the code, would be translated, the things which are now about to choose to be. As the first and the last, he has declared things that will be. But with the use of the middle voice, this also indicates that all things will occur according to the choices that each of the actors in this end times narrative will make in bringing about these things. God will not force anyone, but each living being, whether angelic or human, will choose their actions and set forth their destiny. With that said, God knows the beginning from the end. He declares the beginning from the end. But he always works in and through agency, through the choices of others, whether angels, demons, humans, animal institutions, and so on. Therefore, his judgment is righteous and true are his ways. This issue of agency is huge. God sets all things into motion, but uses agents to accomplish his will. Therefore, he cannot be directly blamed for doing bad things or doing evil. But what we also know is that he takes full responsibility for setting it all in motion and for all that happens. At least that is what is explained by his servant Job, whom God said 2 times that he, Job, spoke correctly about him. As Job said, if not he, then who? And this agency relationship supports the fact that he is the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, the one who is responsible for it all because he declared it all. For from him, by or through him, and to him are all things. Not some things, but all things. After these things. So what is the reference to after these things apply to? It is simply saying that some of which John will communicate are things that exist and occur even now, as they have been occurring every moment of now since John's time. But there are other things that have yet to come into existence or have yet to be set free and loosened in the heavenly realms, such that they impact our physical realms. For instance, we will find that there are 4 spiritual beings who are even now bound at the river Euphrates. We get this sense that they are providing some sort of spiritual barrier, because when they are released from their positions, a massive army of spiritual beings are set loose and they kill 1/3 of mankind. So this is an example of things that will choose to come to be after the things which clearly are. The answers are in the code. But to know what things are and what things will come after these things, we must examine and stick to the code, regardless of what we have been told in the myriads of end times fictions. If we stick to the code, we will come to know how to distinguish between present realities and the future, and those things that, like a cake, are layered such that they are happening now and then. The Spirit was quite meticulous in his use of the present tense, the future tense, which he rarely used, the aorist tense, and others, to give us the roadmap to follow. He does not want us lost in this journey, and he does not want us guessing. We just need to be willing to trust that he is the one who penned every word and intentionally chose how each word would be used and understood in the revelation. 2 Peter chapter 1, 20 through 21. But know this, first of all, that no prophecy of Scripture is a matter of one's own interpretation. For no prophecy was ever made by an act of human will, but men, moved by the Holy Spirit, spoke from God. As stated previously, God always works through agency, through the angelic, and through humanity. With that said, it is all still his works, and therefore they are all perfect. None of what we will read came because of human will or because of human conventions. To hold otherwise is in effect to demand that God conforms to our ways, thereby rejecting this proclamation that no prophecy was ever made by an act of human will. 7 stars and 7 lampstands. Revelation 1, verse 20. As for the mystery of the 7 stars which you saw in my right hand, and the 7 golden lampstands, The 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches, and the 7 lampstands are the 7 churches. Fiction alert! Fiction alert! The stars and the lampstands are idioms that we do not have to reach back into the code to interpret, as Jesus tells us what they mean. The 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches, and the 7 lampstands are the 7 churches. But due to this fiction surrounding this verse, we will have to reach back into the code and use it as our plumb line to keep our understanding straight. Stars and angels. As to the fiction, the Greek word translated angels means messengers. Therefore, some have said that this speaks not about literal angels, but about those who delivered messages to the churches, the pastors of those churches. They then say that Jesus holds pastors in his right hand. This is one of those instinctual religious wisdoms that lifts pastors up to a position of authority and power in the lives of God's people that they were never intended to have. A fiction which establishes a hierarchical, top-down structure of church leadership. Unbeknownst to most Christians, pastors are just a part of the spiritual oversight which the Spirit has placed in the church. After all, he gave some as apostles, and some as prophets, and some as evangelists, and some as pastors and teachers, for the equipping of the saints, for the work of service, to the building up of the body of Christ. Pastors are not at the top of that list. In addition, the Spirit details for us the priority of authority in terms of the spiritual gifts that are intended to minister to the body. And God has appointed in the church first apostles, second prophets, third teachers, then miracles, then gifts of healings, helps, administrations, various kinds of tongues. Pastors are not even listed, just teachers. And then they are third on the list. So to presume that the stars refer to the pastors who are delivering these messages is a dangerous presumption that has seriously damaged the body all throughout time, as this hierarchical top-down structure of leadership has historically led to corruption and abuse within the church. As far as the code and expositional constancy, stars are pictures of angelic beings, and never once throughout the entire codex is this idiom used to speak of pastors or any other leader in the church. The angels or the messengers are his ministers, and they are sent out to render service for the sake of those who will inherit salvation. In some measure, the angels guard or oversee the spiritual welfare of the churches. We see a type of this as Michael the archangel and the angel Gabriel seem to have a role of protection over the nation of Israel, the faithful in God, the bondservants of Jesus Christ. Moreover, this viewpoint of the angelic is consistent with the perspective through which we are to understand this letter, from the viewpoint of the heavenlies, and not the viewpoint from humanity. God sees what transpires on earth through the lens of the angels and demons who are his servants, his agents, which carry out his purposes amongst humanity, and not through the lens of humanity. This is why one of his compound names is used more than any other throughout the Codex, and that is Yahweh Sabaoth, the Lord of heaven's armies. All things are initiated from the throne of God, are communicated through the agency of spiritual messengers, angels and demons, and finally come to fruition in the natural realms. Lampstands and churches. The 7 lampstands are the 7 churches. This picture symbolizes the way the churches are to be a light that shines bright, burning with the oil of the Spirit of God. In effect, the church is to be a light to the world, a city set on a hill, a lamp to give illumination to all that are in the house, so people may turn from darkness to light, and from the dominion of Satan to God. 2 Corinthians 4:6. For God, who said, "Light shall shine out of darkness," is the one who has shown in our hearts to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Christ. We are going to find that much of what is written to the churches is rendered in the present tense and often as a participle, and therefore applies not just to those specific physical churches that existed in the first century, but to the churches every moment of now that are characterized by the descriptions of these 7 churches. Those who hold tightly to the pre-tribulation rapture myth, the dispensationalists, miss this point and tend to try to notch each church into a specific epoch of time throughout history, instead of to a specific spiritual and relational character and identity. Again, if the issue is time, we should just skip to the 7th letter. Let's just jump right now to the book of Laodicea. But since the issues raised are all about spiritual and relational character and identity, we will go through each church to understand what the Spirit even now says to the churches. The only question will be, are you one who is now having ears to hear what the Spirit now says to the churches? We'll stop right here and pick up in our next podcast in Revelation chapter 2. To get a free download of the full written transcript with all the scripture references footnoted, please go to threshermediagroup.com. That is THRESHER mediagroup.com. This is Steve with Thresher Media Group. When you're ready to listen, tune in.